Hi, this is Mato. Welcome to my online chess lecture. In this video I will show you a game between Mikhail Tal and Alexander Koblents. This game was played in Riga in 1957. Mikhail Tal had white pieces and he started with e4. Alexander Koblents played c5, the Sicilian defense. Knight to f3, d6, d4, c takes on d4, knight takes on d4, knight to f6, knight to c3, all the standard moves. Knight to c6, bishop to g5. This is the Richter-Rause variation of the Sicilian defense. e6, queen to d2, preparing to castle queenside. Bishop to e7, Tal castled queenside, and Koblents castled kingside. Knight to b3, queen to b6, f3, defending the pawn, on e4 and intending g4, a6, intending b5 later on. White to move. g4 was played. Tal was not interested in grabbing the pawn on d6 with this variation. Bishop takes on f6, bishop takes on f6, queen takes on d6. This variation was not to Tal's liking. He played g4. Rook to d8, intending d5. Bishop to e3, attacking the queen and clearing the g5 square for the pawn. Queen to c7, h4, b5. Perhaps d5 should have been considered. b5, g5, attacking the knight. Knight to d7, white to move. How would you continue to attack? Perhaps h5 comes to mind. Tal played g6, sacrificing the pawn, and whichever way black takes on g6, white plays h5. H takes on g6 was played. h5, g takes on h5, rook takes on h5, knight to f6, attacking the rook. What is the best square for the rook? Tal played rook to h1, intending queen to h2, and then queen to h8, checkmate. d5, preventing queen to h2. White to move. How would you continue? Perhaps bishop to f4 comes to mind. Then black may continue with bishop to d6, and after bishop takes on d6, queen takes on d6. This variation was not to Tal's liking. He played e5, sacrificing the second pawn. Knight takes on e5. If queen takes on e5, bishop to f4, and where is the queen going? After queen to f5, bishop to d3, and white is winning. Back to our game. Knight takes on e5 was played. Bishop to f4, pinning the knight and intending queen to h2. Bishop to d6, queen to h2, threatening checkmate. King to f8, queen to h8, check. Knight to g8. Perhaps king to e7 should have been considered. Maybe it was, but there was a purpose behind this move. Because Koblents had some deep planning, intending to trap white's queen. He was expecting this move, rook to h7. White is threatening. Queen takes pawn on g7. This is what he had in mind. f5, defending the pawn, and now threatening knight to g6, winning the queen. Very clever plan. How to save the queen? What would you do? Mikhail Tal played an incredible move. Bishop to h6, rook to d7. Well, knight to g6 doesn't work, because bishop takes on g7. So, rook to d7 first, and then knight to g6. This was a very exciting moment for Koblents. He was sure he was winning, unless, of course, Tal can produce some magic. How should white continue? Is white in trouble? It looks like that white is in trouble. Can you find a sensible move for white? What would you do? Mikhail Tal played bishop takes on b5. Back to move. first move that comes to mind is knight to g6. But Koblents played rook to f7. Why he didn't like knight to g6? Let's have a look. If knight to g6, this is what Tal had in mind. Knight to d4. Who can find this move? And after knight takes queen, then, or let's have a look. If rook to f7, then comes an incredible move, which is nearly impossible to find. Bishop to d7. And one line goes like this. Queen takes on d7. Bishop takes on g7 check. Rook takes on g7. Knight takes on e6 check. Queen takes on e6. Queen takes on g7. And white is winning in this variation. Let's go back. So instead of rook to f7, knight takes queen. And then knight takes on e6 check. King to f7, knight takes on c7. Rook takes on c7, rook takes on g7 check. King to f8, rook takes on c7 discover check. Knight takes bishop, bishop to c6, rook to b8, rook to a7, knight to g6, rook to h1, and white is winning in this variation too. Back to our game. So, after thinking long and hard, rook to f7 was played. Should white save the bishop on b5? Tal played rook to g1, attacking the pawn on g7, rook to a7. If a takes on b5, then rook from g takes on g7, rook takes on g7, bishop takes on g7, and white is winning. Rook to a7, helping to defend the pawn on g7. Knight to d4. Knight to g4. If a takes on b5, and from d takes on b5, and white is winning. Knight to g4, blocking the g file and clearing the square for the bishop. F takes on g4, bishop to e5, knight to c6. Black to move. Bishop takes on c3 was played. If a takes on b5, knight takes bishop on b5. So Koblents cleverly removed the target. Bishop takes on c3. Perhaps pawn takes bishop was expected. But there was another surprise from Tal. Tal played bishop to e3. What is the purpose of this move? Can you see what is the purpose? This was the idea. If a takes on b5, bishop to c5, check, and after rook to e7, a bishop takes on e7, and white is winning. So, Koblents played another clever move. d4. White to move. Which piece to save? What would you do? Perhaps knight takes rook comes to mind. Tal played another incredible move. Rook from g to h1. What is the purpose of this move? Rook to d7. Well, the purpose is revealed if black takes on e3. How would you continue now in this position if you had white pieces? What was the idea behind rook from g to h1? This is the idea. Queen takes knight, no joking. King takes queen, rook to h8, checkmate. Back to our game. Koblents played rook to d7. Bishop to g5 now. A takes on b5. At this stage, Koblents again was pleased with his game. It looks like that he defended well, and he couldn't see how white can make a progress. But Now Tal made another incredible move, which is not easy to find. Rook from 1 to h6. What a move. What is the purpose of this move? Let's play a random move. If rook takes on a2, then rook to f6, check. Pawn takes rook. Bishop to h6, check. Rook to g7. Bishop takes on g7, check. King to e8. Queen takes on g8, check. And white is winning. Back to our game. So, what if g takes on h6? Then bishop takes on h6, check. And after rook to g7, bishop takes on g7, check. Queen takes on g7, rook takes on g7, rook takes on g7, then pawn takes bishop is winning, and so is queen to h4. Koblents played d3, white to move. Pawn takes bishop, d2, check, king to d1, queen takes on c6, and now rook to f6, check, rook to f7, white to move. White played a move and black resigned. And the move is, please pause and find the move. Did you pause? What did you find? The move is queen takes on g7. Koblents resigned. This is check. If king goes to e8, then rook takes on f7. Black can prolong the game with, say, queen to f3, check. King takes pawn, check. King to c1, queen to f1, check. King to b2. And black has no sensible continuation. What else? If king goes to e7, then rook takes on f7, check. King to d6, bishop to f4, check. King to d5, and there is checkmate in one. Queen to d4, checkmate. And that is a normal game by Tal's standard. What do you think of this game? And that is all. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. I wish you good luck with your chess, and bye for now.